will fight to the end. Doesn't matter what the world brings against me. I will fight.
Hey, thanks for joining us today on Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase on WNTW 820 AM The Answer. And my name is Amanda Chase, and I am so happy to serve you as your state senator here in Virginia and the 11th Senatorial District, which includes Chesterfield, Amelia, and Colonial Heights. And just for the record, because a lot of people confuse this sometimes, I don't work in D.C. I try to avoid that area at all possible. I think I'm allergic to it, honestly. And I actually go to Richmond. That's where I like to go because we get things done in Richmond and we balance our budget and great people there too. So this is our weekly town hall because my goal is to stay in touch with you and I want to hear from you. So take down that number, 804-454-1366, and I hope you'll call in today. But this is all about you, and my goal in having this each week is to provide you an opportunity to hear about issues that are going in our community in the 11th District in Virginia. And so we're going to be talking about issues, and a lot of the things we're talking about, as I mentioned last week and weeks before, I have office hours every Tuesday and Thursday, even out of session, to meet with constituents and anybody that just needs to talk about a particular issue. And so one of the big topics that is in the media this week and that's coming to my office is the concern over the integrity of this election. And so that's what we're going to concentrate on our show today. I am not going to talk to you about the things that I've done in the past. What I want to talk to you about today, I'm just going to skip through some of my bio because I've been on enough that hopefully you've actually heard my show. But I am a mom of 4 kids, 3 teens, and a 20-year-old daughter. My husband and I do have a financial services business. And we're real people just like you. And I'm so honored to serve you all in the state Senate as a citizen legislator. And so I'm so thankful for this opportunity to talk to you about what's going on in Virginia. So today's topic is about voter registrations in Virginia. The Public Interest Legal Foundation released a report in conjunction with the Virginia Voters Alliance with the following news. In our small sample, they say, of just 8 Virginia counties who responded to our public inspection request, they found 1,046 aliens who registered to vote illegally. Yeah, many of you suspected that, and we're hearing about it right now. We're doing some investigation, and that's why we've got Senator Jill Vogel, who's going to be on the phone a little bit later, who actually chairs the Privileges and Elections Committee, which I also serve on there as well. We also have Larry Haake as the Chesterfield County Registrar who's going to be coming on. The problem is that this is most certainly exponentially worse. They took apparently a small data set and came back with these issues. And so here's what they say. They say the problem is most certainly exponentially worse because we have no data regarding aliens on the registration rolls for the other 125 Virginia localities. Even in this small sample, when the voting history of the small sample of alien registrants is examined, get this, nearly 200 verified ballots were cast before they were removed from the rolls. Each one of them is likely a felony. Okay, so the problem is this. In the small sample, we're finding some discrepancies. And so, when you hear things in the news and that kind of thing, one thing that I've learned is, kind of settle down and, we got to get to the bottom of the issue, find out what's true, what's not. I mean, I know from, my experience with the media, a lot of times, they're trying to do the best they can. They're short-staffed and trying to get these right. But we really do want to cut to the chase, no pun intended, on this issue today. So I've got the people that know exactly what's going on with this. So my first person I'm going to bring up is the registrar for Chesterfield County, Larry Haake. And Larry, are you there?
I am here.
Fantastic. Thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. I called him yesterday, and he said absolutely. So thanks for coming on such short notice. We thought it was that important that we changed our whole show to talk about this today.
Well, it is important, and I appreciate you having me on, and I hope that I'll be able to enlighten you and your listeners on the truth surrounding that allegation of aliens.
Well, as I just mentioned, a report has just been released with some startling information, which really puts into question our viability as a commonwealth when it comes to the integrity of our voter rolls. And we're rapidly approaching, as we all know, a very critical election. And now it's coming out that we have potentially serious problems at our very own State Board of Elections and the Department of Elections, as well as some of the registrar offices. In fact, more than 1,000 non-citizens registered to vote in Virginia. As we mentioned, nearly 200 ballots in elections before being purged from voter rolls, according to this government watchdog group. What do you have to say about that?
Well, sometimes data is not all that it seems to be. In this particular instance, this group did indeed ask for inspection of records under the National Voter Registration Act. They submitted a request to Chesterfield County, and we're in the report as one of those that did not respond, because I talked to the Commissioner of Elections, and he said to me that we didn't have the data they wanted. And it was specific about non-citizens who might have registered to vote. And the way we become aware of non-citizens is if an individual goes to the Division of Motor Vehicles and makes an application for a driver's license or other business, they're asked whether or not they're a citizen. If they check no, then that information goes to the Department of Elections, and they run a comparison on the voter list, and we're notified if that person happens to be registered in a locality. And this happens on occasion. I can tell you 9.5 times out of 10, that person just checked the wrong box. They are, in fact, a citizen, but they checked the wrong box. There's an epidemic of people that get distracted or don't pay attention, or for whatever reason they check that they're not a citizen. Some of these registered 20 years, been voting for 20 years. And they got a name like Joe Smith, but we get a notice that they have been identified as a potential non-citizen. We then send them a letter saying, you did this at DMV. And the general reaction is anger. How dare you accuse me of not being a citizen? I've been on the rolls my entire life. I've voted my whole life. And they get so mad, they don't send us the affirmation that they are indeed a citizen.
Oh, wow.
And they end up being canceled, and the reason they're canceled is because they declared themselves to be a non-citizen. I've looked at the data that this group got from my colleagues that answered, and I've looked at our own data internally, and just about all of them on the report, so just about all of that 1,000 that they're claiming fall into that category. So are they in fact non-citizens? For the most part, no. They're inattentive citizens who checked the wrong box, found themselves being declared non-citizens, didn't respond properly or timely, and ended up being canceled, and now they show up on this report, and there they are. So as sensational as this organization is trying to make this, I'm afraid the rest of the story is just not the case. Now, could there be non-citizens on the voter rolls? There could be. We have actually had people who've gone to DMV, checked yes, and they should have checked no. I mean, that's kind of the other way around. And we send them a voter card, and they call us up horrified. I'm not a citizen. I can't vote. What did I do to get this voter card? And we look at where you check yes to citizen. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Please take me off. Please don't do anything to me.
No, I think you brought up a very good point, and a lot of people may not realize this or really think about it, but Virginia actually requires applicants to merely check a box in order to prove their citizen status. They don't have to provide any type of documentary proof of citizenship, correct?
No, to register to vote, one does not have to do that. That's how a non-citizen can get on the voter rolls, because there's no requirement that they produce any of these documents. In fact, back to that report you were talking about, if you look at the recommendations they have based on their sensational headlines, none of it really is anything for me to do. Some of it's legislation, which would be in your world, or do other things, or other entities doing things, or make other databases available. But they kind of blow us up, local election officials, but in the end, they don't have any recommendations for anything we can do because we can't. There's nothing we can do.
We have about 1 minute left for this particular segment, but one of the things that I would also like to talk about is, in the Republican side, we had a bill that would require people to present a valid picture ID before they could vote. But there was an exception to that if you were absent, like my daughter's in college and she asked to get an absentee ballot. She didn't have to send any type of picture ID or anything like that. So we have about 30 seconds left. Do you have about 30 seconds to answer that question?
Right. That does seem to be a strange situation where the voter in person with you has to prove who they are, but the voter getting a ballot by mail really doesn't have to.
Larry Haake will be back in 3 minutes. Y'all stay
All right.
tuned.
Chesterfield County Colonial Heights Crime Solvers program needs your help to solve several robberies throughout Chesterfield. Between Thursday, June 30th and Wednesday, August 10th, officers responded to 4 armed robberies at local 7-Eleven convenience stores. In each case, cash was taken, and in 2 of the cases, tobacco products, including Newport cigarettes and cigars, were also stolen. None of the victims was physically injured. In the August 10th robbery, surveillance cameras captured images of 2 suspects. Those images can be seen at crimesolvers.net. If you have information about this or any unsolved crime in or person wanted by Chesterfield or Colonial Heights, you can submit a tip anonymously through Crime Solvers. Call 748-0660, click the form online at crimesolvers.net, or text 274-637, starting your message with the keyword Watson. Remember, if your tip helps law enforcement, you could receive a cash reward. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and take the time to solve the crime.
Welcome back to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase on WNTW 820 AM. Just a reminder that you can call in 804-454-1366. And we are so privileged to have Larry Haake, who's the Chesterfield County Registrar. And we were finishing and we were talking about the instance of voter absentee. If someone is not able to, maybe it's a college student, and they're not able to get back home, but they still want to participate in the election. They fill out their absentee form, and there's no, as I was just commenting, my daughter didn't have to submit any type of picture ID or anything like that, and you were commenting on that.
Yeah, that does seem to be contradictory to the whole purpose, but on the other hand, you've got to realize the difficulty if they did have to send an ID, because a lot people didn't have to go. I mean, it's not so hard for a student, but others that vote ID, they have to get a copy of their ID and send it in. There are some circumstances where voters do have to do that in federal elections. If they registered by mail and have not voted in person, they do have to include a copy of their ID when they send their ballot back. So there are circumstances under that. The Virginia student exemption, though, does not require that ID to come in.
So, a lot of this involves a lot of trust. I mean, we are asking people, are you a citizen, yes or no? A lot of this requires a lot of faith and trust that people are going to do the right thing. And unfortunately, we don't always have people with good intentions, but hopefully most people are. What are you seeing as the key issues as the county registrar right before the election?
Well, I think there's a lot of concern among the voters. As in your opening, you were talking about the integrity of the election. Voters are hearing a lot of things like this report that may cause them concern. That hopefully we've mitigated some of that. But suggestions that the election is rigged, I think there's some concern about that, and that would suggest that people like me are doing something wrong because we're the ones administering the election. So, I'm assuring people it's not rigged. There's no one person that's in control of things. It's a big team. It's a lot of people in Chesterfield. That we'll have close to 1,200 people at polling places on Election Day. So there's a lot of people watching things going on, a lot of checks and balances. The voting machines themselves are never connected to the internet. They're never connected to anything. They're tested prior to the election. So the vote count itself is pretty well protected. The state voter database system has some pretty heavy security associated with it. So, nothing is foolproof, but to hack into that would be very difficult. We are having a lot of registrations come in. We have had occasion where we've had fake applications. We've caught a number of those. I don't think those are efforts to produce fake voting. I think there's a situation out there where organizations hire people and pay them based on the number of applications. So I think some of these people that get hired make up names, make up fake addresses. We've seen all of that. Copy applications, so we get multiple applications for the same person in different handwriting. We're intercepting that kind of stuff, and they're not making it on the rolls. So there's a lot of things that we're attentive to that really go to the integrity of the election, and hopefully the voters can have confidence in what we're doing, that only those who are eligible and qualified will end up actually casting a ballot, either by absentee or on election day.
Mr. Haake, just out of curiosity, in the Washington Post, they reported on September 29th, I know you probably saw the situation that occurred in Harrisonburg at JMU, where 19 were initially registered as voters in the Shenandoah Valley city of Harrisonburg, and they recognized the name of a gentleman who had died in 2014 at age 87, and because his son is a well-known local judge, she just happened to recall that the judge's father had died. He was actually a retired Fairfax County elementary school principal who'd fought in World War II. And so, all the forms, had come in. They found that, basically someone had filed him to vote, and, obviously he's no longer with us. And this seems to be happening. Have you heard of that? Have you, heard of that story?
I have heard of that incident, and that is not unlike what I just told you we have been seeing.
Okay.
People generating applications and probably for personal gain rather than for an effort to cast a false ballot. I mean, we don't know that for sure, but the system can catch things like that. I mean, they caught them up there. Here in Chesterfield, we caught them. City of Richmond, other counties around us have been seeing the same thing. This is all from third-party groups doing voter registration. Senator, I believe you might either be asked to carry a bill or see some bills coming in the next session that would provide a deterrent to these types of things. I know I and others are working on some language that may be appropriate for you to consider as new legislation.
Absolutely.
That would block some of this stuff.
Well, that's I think the most important thing is that we want to make sure that we can ensure that, work with our registrars to ensure the integrity of this vote. And actually, I've worked with Larry Haake for many years as an activist and know that he's one of the good guys who's actually looking out for us and has always been above rapport. And, this is something that we need to be, get ahead of. And what I have noticed is that, it just seems like we could go in and fix some of these issues. It seems like a great idea to many of us to go in and get the photo ID, but yet there's some on the other side of the aisle who disagree and think it's a way of keeping other people out, which I just don't understand that thinking. But we definitely do need to come up with some other ways. Give me some ideas of some thoughts you all have on how to fix some of these issues.
Well, for example, in the case of third-party groups, a prohibition on paying people to get voter registration applications. I mean, that's one of the key issues. The other is requiring third-party groups to register with the Department of Elections, where they get an identification number, and then requiring that number on every application they turn in. Because a lot of these coming in, we don't know where they're coming from. And some of the groups are not legitimate. There was a group right there called Virginia Votes that we identified some of these bad applications, and as best I could find out, their address was an empty storefront in a strip mall. So things like that, and of course none of us have the authority to investigate, neither the local offices nor even the Department of Elections. But when you get into the Code of Virginia, a lot of these things are misdemeanors. I think we need to elevate them to the level of felony, really make them serious crimes. That in itself could be a deterrent. So I'm in the process now of looking at some of the laws, and even in new laws, making them at least a Class 5 felony.
Well, I am certainly on board with helping with that, and we'll have to get together after we get off the air here. And I have office hours Tuesdays and Thursdays. Let's get together. We have 30 seconds left to the break. Larry Haake, Chesterfield County Registrar, thank you so much for your service for so many years to the county, and look forward to working with you on drafting some of these bills. So
absolutely. Thanks for having me, and all your listeners. Get yourselves ready for Election Day. Be ready to vote. 2 constitutional amendments. Get yourselves ready ahead of time so you can flow right on through the polling place.
That's right. We've been promoting those, so they should be fully prepared.
Very good. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Larry. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This single message.
I will fight to the end. Doesn't matter what the world brings against me. I will fight to the end. Doesn't matter what.
Thanks again for joining us today on Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase on WNTW 820 AM The Answer. And we are so glad you're listening in today. What a fascinating topic. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about some issues that could potentially be out there that have to do with the voting and your voting integrity, the value of your vote, and making sure that counts. And our next guest is a good friend of mine and colleague, Senator Jill Vogel. Jill is a nationally recognized attorney, and she's a managing partner of a law firm that specializes in charity and nonprofit organizations, election law, boy, that's going to be important today, and ethics. She's consistently been listed by Washingtonian Magazine as a top lawyer in her field. This is her 3rd term in the Senate of Virginia. She represents about 12 different counties, but I'm going to tell you she's from Fauquier County. She's also a wife, a mother, small business owner, and she's just a great all-around person. Love working on the unofficial female caucus, Republican caucus in the Senate. Welcome, Jill Vogel. Are you there, Jill? Are you there? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Jill, you've heard all the concerns about the voter registration rolls and maintaining the integrity. I've been talking about, we were spending some time on the phone yesterday in regards to this report, the Public Interest Legal Foundation, that was released on September the 30th. And I know that I think you said that you were going to listen in, and the information. This is all I hope people realize this is really happening spontaneous, but thank God we have the show. You can listen and get a live feel of what's going on. I mean, this kind of hit yesterday, and Jill and I were talking. I was able to get Larry Haake on the phone. I said, hey, can you join our call? And now this is great. So we're having this great dialogue. Were you able to hear Larry Haake and what he said about that report?
I was able to hear just a little bit about what he said. And then I got kicked off for a minute or two. So I was trying really hard to dial back in and listen, and then I went online and was listening. So Larry is really smart, and I trust his assessment of all of these things. But, I noted that he said, in some cases he thought those were probably errors. But I just want to reiterate that if you go back and you look at what some of the watchdog groups have said and what the report that you just referenced talked about, they have uncovered evidence of more than 1,000 non-citizens in Virginia on the voter rolls. Nearly 200 of them were confirmed to have cast votes in Virginia elections. So, nobody ever would intend to undermine what the registrars are doing. But what the issue is we have registrars, and I know you've heard from them as I've heard from them, who are incredibly concerned and really frustrated about what's happening right now. And so this piece about, having people on the voter rolls who are not legitimate registered voters because they are either a convicted felon, they are a minor, they're dead, or in the case that I just referenced and you were talking about earlier, they're not legal citizens and not allowed to vote. That undermines the entire integrity of the process and, frankly, what democracy is meant to be. So that's sort of the beginning piece of all this, and that is at the registration point. But now what we're hearing from registrars, and I know this was what was expressed to you as well, is that we now have a situation where the system in Virginia the technology itself is having some issues. And that doesn't mean the machines, but it means the database in Richmond that our registrars use.
And didn't they just change that? I mean, we were using an old system.
Right, and they brought it in-house, and I think probably the timing of that was poor, because that's a very poor planning, in my view, to do that in the middle of a major election year. So what you have are thousands and thousands of new registrations coming in, thousands and thousands of change requests, and a system that is now, as any IT person would concede, any kind of changes create all kinds of challenges. And I think the challenge that's been created is that our registrars actually don't have access to the system. It's down for periods of time. It's been slowed immensely by having lots of people on the system. So I think the concerns are really broad, and I think one of the reasons that, you and I have spoken and the registrars are reaching out to me and to you and to others with such grave concerns is because they are really, their hands are tied. I mean, they're not in a position to be able to do the work that they need to do, and they work incredibly hard. And right now, I mean, if people were aware of the stresses on our registrars, how much they're working, many of them, are short-staffed, they're not well compensated, and they have a hard time, finding the people who will work to do this work. So, I have such sympathy because I don't think there's anybody in government who works harder than our voter registrars doing, with limited resources, what they are required to do. And no matter what happens, they've got to be prepared on Election Day for what is going to be, I would consider, massive voter turnout, which is what we want.
But we have about 30 seconds left. They were saying that it would take 6 minutes just to enter in one application versus seconds. And
right.
So if they have over 3,000 electronic signatures, because they're coming, a lot of these are coming through DMV, when we come back, we're going to talk about that. We're going to be back in about 3 minutes with Jill Vogel. We'll have 8 minutes to talk more about this crazy issue.
Okay, I'll hurry.
Okay, great. Welcome back to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase on WNTW 820 AM, The Answer. And on the phone today, I have Senator Jill Vogel, who's also running for Lieutenant Governor. She serves on Privileges and Election, is the chair of that committee. And, let's just talk, Jill, about Harrisonburg. There's a student there. He was a young Democrat who was actually fired from this particular organization called Harrisonburg Votes. He had turned in 19 deceased voters. And we were talking a little bit earlier about the story about how the person that they just happened to pick, he was a retired Fairfax Elementary School principal and had fought in World War II. And his son, retired Harrisonburg General District Court Judge Richard Allen Claybrook Jr. This is very, very much an issue here. We've got students, and he hasn't been charged with anything yet, so I want to be very careful. I'm not releasing names or anything like that. But this is a problem that we in the General Assembly do need to address, and I understand that the General Assembly, we've just recently, this is now public now, right, the meeting? Right. So, yeah, as chairman of the Privileges and Elections Committee, I have to tell you that I take this so seriously. Yes. Because
this is the foundation of democracy, and if people have doubts about the process or doubts about the integrity of the process, so whether it has to do with the statewide database and the issues our registrars are facing there, or whether it's our registrars' frustration that they're being inundated with thousands of registrations that, they can't process, or in this case, registrations that are fraudulent. Right. And so, this notion that these 19 were only caught because of a fluke, because somebody happened to recognize the name of the deceased, I mean, think about how likely that is. I know, and how much is going undetected. Right, and so from my perspective, I mean, we have lots of different issues here. One, that we desperately need some more legislative reform. Yes. We need, better voter ID laws, better, uniform standards, and make sure that they're met. But beyond that, we also have a fundamental issue in Richmond, and that is among the folks who are responsible for administering these elections at the State Board of Elections. I am very concerned, and I know you read in that report, as people are requesting information, the lack of transparency is staggering. I mean, that is what makes the system clean and fair and gives people confidence in the system, so that when, third-party groups are out there inundating our registrar's offices with these registrations, that we have some way to, do a cross-check, do a match, which we really can't do. And more than that, when we're asking Richmond for assistance and support and for information that they are supposed to provide, and they're trying to act in a way that isn't very transparent, it should give us all, a reason for concern.
And I think what you're referring to is this particular organization, Public Interest Legal Foundation, had basically FOIA'd each of the registrars and asked them to turn over data that would allow them to kind of audit and do some type of comparison and see who should be there, who shouldn't be there. And they were told, no, we're not going to give that to you. But instead, they were told to go to the Commissioner Cortez, who I actually talked to yesterday, and he's agreed to come on the show because he had mentioned that he was going to release basically a statewide list, but we're still following up on that.
Right.
So.
Well, and I think that's the worst part of the report that that you're referring to, and that it alleges that public servants and political appointees have breached their duty to the public by actively undermining the electoral transparency and working to, frankly, stifle the investigative efforts of independent watchdog groups. And that's, if substantiated, anybody who covers up evidence of voter registration fraud has to be held accountable for such a clear breach of the public trust. And I think, at a minimum, when the registrars or outside third-party groups have requested, information regarding, what the state board has and what Edgardo Cortez, the person you're referring to, has, they should provide that. That's their job.
Right. And it looks like they were trying to leave out some of the information they requested, like whether they were a citizen or not. They wanted to leave that off the report, correct? Right.
They have said that they will not allow that part to be reported. So what they're attempting to do is not let the public or these watchdog groups know how many non-citizens were registered. That's fundamentally all someone was asking.
And I understand that the Commonwealth formally arranged to use the Federal Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements, or SAVE, database to detect aliens. But it seemed vigorous use seems to have ended during the administration of our current governor, Governor Terry McAuliffe. Any comments on that?
Well, that's the concern, is that there is a lot of sort of administrative leeway and discretionary decision-making that's occurred that, in my mind, has made this much, much worse.
It feels like Groundhog Day. Does this not remind you of whenever those lists were being hidden from us when it came to who were the offenders, when we were talking about felons?
Exactly, yeah.
Kind of a similar story here.
Right, that's right. And as Justice Brandeis famously said, sunshine is the best disinfectant. And so everybody deserves transparency. And that's what gives us confidence, and that's what gives everybody, an opportunity to determine where are the issues so they can be fixed. And as a fundamental threshold matter, to withhold that kind of information should make us all concerned. Why would you want to withhold the information? Why wouldn't you want to work together with a legislature and outside groups to try to make the election, give people as much confidence as possible?
Absolutely. And just so my listeners, folks, know, I've actually co-founded a group called the Transparency Caucus. And so I'm very much about pushing transparency in any part of the government that we can, because these people are working for us. I mean, I agree, it should be transparent, and it's not. And so we have a goal. We have 1 minute left, Jill.
Well, and while you have 1 minute left, let me just tell you the part that should really, it makes a significant point is that the registrars are really on our side.
Yes.
They have wanted to provide information. They wanted to run these checks. They wanted to do this, but they have hit a brick wall in Richmond. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's important. I'm calling the meeting next week for us to get together and call these folks in and listen to testimony and figure out what can we do in the very immediate near term to address this, both with respect to Veris, the statewide system where they're having all these issues, as well as all these concerns about transparency and, voter confidence.
Well, I know folks are going to be very interested in hearing about this, and I will see if we can't get Jill on next Thursday. We'll have to check her schedule and see where she is. I know the Lee brothers are taking over for me next week, but I know that they would probably love to have you on and ask you and fill you in. Jill Vogel, Senator Jill Vogel. Jill, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
I'll definitely see you on Thursday.
Okay, I'll see you Thursday. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Thanks again for joining us today on Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase, WNTW 820 AM The Answer. Thanks for joining us. We're really in the final wrap-up, the final 4 minutes of our show today, and I really want to thank our special guest today, Senator Jill Vogel, and Chesterfield County's registrar, Larry Haake, for coming on our show today. And just so you know, next week, the Lee brothers are going to be subbing for me, and you'll be really excited to hear them. I know many of you already know them, are faithful listeners of theirs. They're on every Friday from 3 to 6. Same radio station, 820 AM The Answer. And they're going to be subbing for me next week while I'm at an education summit. And so I won't be able to be here next week, but they will. And I'm going to follow up with Jill Vogel, and we'll see if we can't get her to come on the show. So you guys will know exactly what's going on. So pay attention, circle on your calendar next Thursday, October the 16th at 9 a.m. That's where we're going to have that big meeting at the General Assembly. Republican announced a joint meeting of privileges and elections. Senator Vogel is the chair. I am one of the members on that committee. And so we will get to the bottom of this. Trust me. And we're going to work with our registrars. Many of them are just like us. They're bringing these things to our attention, and we're being trying to get ahead of this before the election. And so we will have some answers for you over the next couple weeks. So what did we learn today? Well, unfortunately, there could be some problems. We've identified a couple issues as far as the current system that they are using to store the voter files and the names of folks that are registered to vote. They've had some issues with that. They just updated the IT system. Nobody asked me. I would have said no, wait till after a major election. I don't know. It just seems to make sense to me. But, people do things in government that don't always make sense. That's just a great example right there. Do not ever update your IT session. Can't even say it right now. Your IT. Don't update it right before a big event. That's like a no-brainer. So that's a big problem. And then also we need some type of way to verify, whether someone is legal or not. I mean, wonder what's going on there. I'm glad that I think it's Senator Obenshain that came up with the voter ID bill. Is that right? My aide's shaking her head. We don't know. I'm thinking it's Mark Obenshain, Senator Obenshain. But Republicans pushed that through, and I'm very thankful they did, because at least if you have a valid government ID, picture ID, when you go to vote, make sure you bring it. That's a great way to make sure that you are you. And, I guess maybe we had more integrity many years ago. I don't know. But apparently we need to put more stops in place to make people verify that they are who they are, proper documentation, because there's some people that want to take off with our elections now, and I will not stand for that. I'll tell you that much. I will live and die on that one. Anyway, join us next week, next Thursday, from 4 to 5 p.m., as you do every week, right here on AM 820, AM WNTW. See you next time. I'll see you in a couple weeks. Lee Brothers will be here next week. Tune in. Talk to you soon.